columnist and journalist. He played a key role in South Africa's 1994 electoral preparations. His writings, including Power in Action and One Virus, Two Countries, challenge conventional paradigms and advocate for inclusive democracy and justice. Thank you very much, Prof, and thank you very much to Dr. Pandor for this opportunity. So the conversation will continue in two forms. The first is we'll start with a conversation with Prof. Friedman and Dr. Pandor that highlights or sketches out the terrain in which we are going to have today's discussion. We'll then continue the conversation with Maulana Bam. Maulana is a leading South African Islamic scholar and interfaith advocate. He serves as the chief imam of the Ahmadiyya Masjid in Johannesburg and is the Secretary General of the Jamiat al-Ulama South Africa. With a Master's in Islamic Science, he has lectured globally and contributed to civic platforms such as the Moral Regeneration Movement, ASRI. His work bridges faith, ethics, social justice with a focus on education, dialogue, and community upliftment. Shukran for coming today, Maulana. We're also joined by Irfan Mangera, Siva Naidu, and Nonkololeko Mutambu. I will talk about your profiles when we get to the second bit of the conversation. But I'll start, Minister, if you could just have the mics. Khalid, former Minister. But Minister is a title of endearment. So Dr. Pandor, I'm going to start here. And I'm starting in a world where Israel has stopped bombing Gaza, in this futuristic world that we are all praying for. What happens at that point? That the day the war ends?
Assalamu alaikum to everyone. What a great pleasure it is to be here. Allow me to begin by congratulating the organizers of this community event. When they spoke to us a few months ago about putting this event together, I wasn't sure that they would succeed. So really, well done to them and thank you to all the community for being here. Juanita, I think that I am especially worried about that period. The reason is, while we see very clearly the victims of the genocide, those who are committing the genocide, we are not seeing the political form that is thinking beyond the current massacre. And so I am concerned that unlike when we were in the midst of our liberation struggle, there isn't an organized formation that is crafting a future state and what its character, statutory being, constitutional form would be. And I think given the complexity of the region, the environment, of the long years of war, you do need political thought about what next. And I am really worried that no one is sitting down and doing that work. And I wish that individuals such as Professor Friedman and other constitutional law advisors, Algie Sachs and others, could be involved in giving form to the political state post the genocide. Because those discussions are going to happen.
Yeah, and I started very deliberately at that point because there's a sense of everyone that's here today would have a great sense of understanding of what's been happening for the last 700 days, and understanding of how we got here. But it's in trying to locate your role as an ordinary person, as a member of South African society, as a citizen of the world, to say what is my place in a solution. So the solution comes in people bringing, patients to South Africa, in activism scenarios like this, but more importantly about having hope for a future, but not passive hope, active hope. And I think that's how I want to craft today's conversation. So Prof, let me ask you a very simple question. Why, in your assessment, has this war raged for 700 days?
Well, there's a short answer and a slightly longer answer. The short answer is America. Quite simply. We've heard 100 times that if America wanted to stop this, it could. But of course, America is not the only culprit. Just about every other Western state is a culprit. The current government of India is a culprit. I mean, there are a lot of elites around the world who are the reason why this genocide doesn't stop. But I think it's very important here, and it relates to your question about what people should do, to make the point that the evidence is becoming overwhelming, that the support for this genocide does not come from the citizens of those countries which are currently fearing the genocide. I don't, I'm sometimes a bit dubious of opinion polls, but when every single poll tells you the same thing, I think it's safe to believe it. There are majorities, large majorities, against the genocide in every Western country in the world, we must take the other countries for granted. So the obvious question is, as you say, why is this carrying on? It is because we increasingly are living in an environment in which democracy exists in theory but not in practice. And therefore, governments do not listen to what their citizens say. But I think that this is changing. And I remain convinced, despite what we see in the environment at the moment, that the growing power of citizens, I mean, things which might appear trivial to us, okay, when a movie about him gets a 24-minute ovation at the film festival, that tells you how people who haven't been politicized feel about it. And I'm convinced that this will have an effect. Of course, what we need to do in our own small ways is to speed up that.
Dr. Pandor, let's talk about that cabinet decision that South Africa made in, was it December 2023, which led to that moment at The Hague in the Palace of Justice, in the International Court of Justice, where we had Advocate Adila Kassim stand up, followed by Advocates Tembeka Ngcukaitobi, etc., pointing out to the world what essentially has now confirmed to have happened. They said to the world that there's going to be mass starvation. They said to the world that this is a systemic effort, and we've only been proven right. But this is probably the worst thing anybody wants to be proven right on. Something like genocide.
Absolutely, it's the worst. But remember that at that time, they were indicating in a very careful way what genocide is described as in the convention, and pointing out the intention to act in that way. They have been proven correct. The world rejected what South Africa was saying. At the highest levels of the United States of America, the comments were we were ridiculous, there was no hope of any success, and so on. This was a case that had no merit. Today, everyone's talking about genocide. Those who don't are supporters of the genocide. It's clear that it was important that South Africa tested international law and put it on the international stage. Post this war, I hope that we will return to respect for international law by strengthening our ability to ensure it's enforceable and that countries act in accord with it.
There was obviously conversations around the consequence of South Africa taking that decision, and in the last 18 to 24 months, we've seen the enormity of that consequence. Talk us through, as someone who sat on the other side of it, what did that consequence look and feel like, on a political level, and was it worth it?
I think yes, it was worth it, because we have to stand up for humanity. It's very important. Otherwise, we've lost our souls, as I think is the case in many countries. There was anticipation that there would be a backlash. And of course, as Minister of Foreign Affairs or International Relations, one experienced it immediately in the various fora, G8, G20, and so on. And what was stark in that response of hostility was that the action of South Africa was constantly, by the Western countries, being compared to the situation in Ukraine. So it was almost as though those in Ukraine deserve concern, while those in Gaza do not deserve concern, and a very racist reaction. I think this does speak to the need for us to examine whether we have sufficiently challenged notions such as Zionism, Islamophobia, and all the other acts of discrimination against groups and people and concepts associated with that. I think the world has to do much more because we are too easily swayed away from a humane response. And it really speaks to the degree to which concepts of hate have taken a grip of the public imagination. So there's work that all of us need to do.
And so, Doctor, before I go to Prof. Friedman, can you perhaps in a very simple way explain what has been the consequence for South Africa as a sovereign state?
Well, I think the tariffs by the United States of America are but one example. Treatment by a range of countries, inability to discuss matters that had been on the table with EU countries, so there are a range of issues, and pointed divisions between BRICS countries, because the member countries responded very differently. So I think South Africa, one, showed that it affirms its Bill of Rights and human rights, and that's very important, but also recognize that the world is not where we are.
And on a personal level, you are heroes in spaces like, you are a hero in spaces like this, but you were equally vilified. Talk to me about that personal experience. And why it was so personalized. You became the face of South Africa going to the International Court of Justice.
Well, as the minister who signed off the papers, I became identified as the individual taking the government of the apartheid state of Israel to court. And of course, it was a decision of the cabinet of South Africa, not Naledi Pandor. And what happened with two organizations in particular in our country, the South African Jewish Board of Deputies and the South African Zionist Federation, made me their football. So they played around with my name, had all sorts of categories assigned to me. One of the most famous is that I went to Iran and I came back with a huge suitcase of money, which ended the bankruptcy of the ANC. I mean, really, absolute nonsense. Sorry, I don't normally use bad language. So that was one. The second was we were asked through Durban by the leader of Hamas at the time to have a call with me in order to indicate the dire humanitarian situation they were confronting at that time, which was the initial few weeks. I, of course, take calls from everybody, So we accepted that call. Following the case at the ICJ, I became the representative office of Hamas in South Africa, and I knew about the October 7 attack before it occurred. So in the public domain, I'm a most famous person on podcasts by people I've never met. I mean, Mr. Rob Herzog has never met me, but the stuff he says about me is quite incredible for someone who's a stranger. So you just become, a toy of social media and misinformation. If the misinformation were based on fact, one would appreciate. But for very wealthy people to essentially base their commentary on lies is quite disgraceful.
Yeah. Prof, 700 days later, there is a huge sense of revisionism, if you like. The sense of people who, the sense that I get from people who have been supportive of the genocide, quickly trying to get cover. and changing their tone, especially in the light of the images of famine, where you can't explain away that. Why do you think there's suddenly this wakening up from whether it is your podcast bros, as Dr. Pandro spoke about, to your public figures, was suddenly getting a conscience on Gaza? Why is that?
Well, I think there are a few things going on. I mean, certainly, sorry, just to repeat, Dr. Pandro, you may not know this, but you are very fortunate if you have no idea this also. This is a great achievement, which many other people are envy, but unfortunately, he's one of the facts of life we have to contend with. So, I think the important thing to understand here is, first of all, to put one issue, which we're all very familiar with, to bed. The Israeli state has been running a propaganda operation. We had the information scandal here under apartheid. That's tame compared to what they spend on disinformation and, just lying essentially to the world. But beyond that, I think we need to talk about the revisionism, because in effect, what most of the Zionist propaganda has done at the moment, from our observation, they aren't making excuses for the genocide. They're just denying that it's there. They're just pretending that it doesn't exist, despite the images we all see in front of us. But there's another dynamic going on there which is very important, which relates to the question of why this is still going on, which is that we have to understand that in the minds of the mainstream in the West, the Israeli state is the West's representative in the Levant, okay? And therefore, a lot of what I write at the moment, and I'm writing in a book I'm producing, is the sense that when people use terms like democratic, they don't actually mean democratic, which to most of us means everybody has the same decisions. They mean Western, okay? And the Israeli state is Western, and therefore the Israeli state must be moral, and the Israeli state can't do anything wrong. Now, Dr. Pandro talks, for example, about the kind of the other countries saying, well, this ICJ case would fail, etc.
Like Germany, for example.
Yes. There's another dynamic which was going on there at the time, which of course you're familiar with, and the Director General has talked about a lot, which is that when, for example, our foreign ministry went to Western powers and said, this is about ethnic cleansing. No, it's not about ethnic cleansing. They never do a thing like that. It's about bombing hospitals. No, they'd never do that. So in other words, whenever you predicted what they were going to do, then they said, no, well, they can't do that because they're nice Westerners like us and they would never do a thing like that. Now, we could talk about how nice Westerners are, that's another topic. But what they're doing at the moment is that all that is collapsed. This nice place is what we all knew it was all along. It's the United States genocide, and they don't know how to cope with it. And a lot of what is going on at the moment is people trying to cover their backs, etc. One of my favorites, it's a scary quote, it's a very unhappy quote, but one of my favorite quotes about this whole human catastrophe comes from an American-based Egyptian writer called Omar al-Akkad, who's just written a magnificent book. And the title of the book is One Day Everybody Will Always Be Against It. And the quote, which is taken from the book, actually tells you what's going on at the moment. Because the full quote goes something like this. One day when it's safe to say so, one day when there's no downside for calling something what it really is, one day when no one ever can be held accountable, then everyone will always be against us. So in other words, they know that they're witnessing a genocide. They know it's a moral state, but they are so invested in it that they forced into these excuses. And that is why citizen pressure is so important.
So obviously the South African experience, Prof, has been a big part in shaping the narrative of how we understand it, but also our own lived experience. I was probably 6 years old when I went to my first Palestinian Solidarity March, because it's so much embedded in who we are as a progressive society. But let's talk to that initial question I asked Dr. Pandor about what happens when the war ends. So Ilan Pape and Noam Chomsky reflect about the similarities of the South African apartheid experience and the Israeli apartheid experience and that commonalities. And it's obviously explored at a time like this to say what comes next. Does the South African example become the example that goes forward? But I found this fascinating and I wanted to get your reflections to say there are analogies often made to South Africa, but they're quite misleading. South Africa relied on its black population. That was 85% of the population. It was its workforce, and they had to sustain them just like the slave owners have to maintain their capital. They tried to sustain the population. They even tried to gain international support for the Bantustans. Israel has no such attitude towards Palestinians. They don't want to have anything to do with them. If they leave, that's fine. If they die, that's fine. In standard neo-colonial pattern, Israel is permitting the establishment of a center for Palestinian elites in Ramallah, and it continues. So these are two of the world's sort of greatest thinkers on Israel and the Israeli state. So talk to me about the reflections in terms of the incentive for Israel to sort of end apartheid, like the South African Nats had, what they were faced with in the early 90s.
Well, you know, everything you've read out there is more or less true. If we look at this strategically, the difference between apartheid South Africa and apartheid Israel is that apartheid Israel does not depend on Palestinian labor in the way that apartheid South Africa depended. I've made the point 100 times that the genocide we're seeing at the moment could never have happened under apartheid, not because they were nice, but because nobody would have come to work anymore. He would have gone to hell. So all of that is true. But where I think, the one other point which I think is worth stressing is that one of the things that strikes me about the difference between the Israeli state and our apartheid state is that throughout apartheid, they continually, not only Bantustans, they continually came up with these absurd ideas about how to somehow accommodate black people without giving them rights, etc. The Israelis are not interested in that stuff because that means Palestinians exist. And as far as they're concerned, Palestinians should not exist. So all of that is true. But, and here it comes to another, what I don't agree with, is that means that the Israeli state cannot be defeated. Because all that means is that the international dimension is going to be a lot more important in this case than it was in our case, okay? Because the options people had to resist internally were voted. And that just puts an additional responsibility on all of us. Because what we do here is important. Now there's one thing here about citizen action which I think is worth stressing strategically. Not a whole lot was achieved under apartheid here by trying to be nice, asking white South Africans to change their minds. If we look at every opinion poll, there is no particular mileage in trying to persuade Jewish Israelis to change their minds. But remember that one source that the Israeli state relies on is Jewish communities around the world. And those communities have no direct stake in what goes on. If that state ceases to exist tomorrow, Jewish life in the world absolutely nothing. And that is why we are seeing increasing numbers of Jews in the US, Europe, etc., rejecting Zionism. And I think that's going to be important. But in a nutshell, what is going to stop this? I think it's also very important to say, to go back to that question. When you say what will happen when the war ends, the war is not going to end with a ceasefire. If a ceasefire means simply that the Israeli state, because it cannot operate with Palestinians, is committed to war forever. As long as there's an Israeli state, there will be war. And not only against Palestinians, against Syrians, against Lebanese people, etc. And therefore, when the war will end when the Israeli state ends. Now, what is going to bring that about? I think that it is going to be citizens around the world putting pressure on their governments and saying, you cannot deal with these people. I read something about a week after October 7th, And what was happening at that stage, that all sorts of people said, oh no, this is their 9/11. And my other said, that's not their 9/11, it's the Sharpeville. The Sharpeville was the event in this country which persuaded citizens of the apartheid state to go outside. And I think what Taylor said is the reaction to it is going to be equivalent. I think over the next few years we're going to see huge and growing pressure of people all over the world to say, don't give them any more guns, don't give them any more weapons. I think that's
Okay, we're going to move the conversation now to our place in it, but Dr. Pillay, I want to talk about the question of impunity here. We attributed it to the US, but there was a point in the early 80s, and I want to draw that parallel, the apartheid state was acting with impunity, and then there was a shift when the international community said, well, hold up, and then that waned. Why is there that why do we still have Benny really saying, we'll treat all of those people on the flotilla like terrorists? Why do you have this stark impunity? Because it feels, to activists who are sitting here, it feels demoralizing that every time you try to stand up, you still have this level of audacious commitment to a genocide.
Well, first, what we must repeat to everybody is don't be discouraged. Because the intention of the intensity of the massacre is to cause you to lose hope, is to cause us to stop being active. So don't lose hope. While I agree with the extract you read from the book and with Prof, I do think one of the elements we don't make enough use of is that of the role of civil society organizations, internationally, not just in South Africa. And so what we must create is a global force of civil society actors acting in concert on a global campaign we all agree on. And that is what we have not done as yet. A global movement is emerging, but it's not coordinated yet. It needs coordination. It needs harnessing. Because remember, with our struggle, while it is true about the black labor force, and many people mention this to me when we talk about the comparative, but remember there were 4 pillars. Mass mobilization, there was mass struggle, armed resistance, international solidarity, and armed resistance. So we need to look at which of those elements are missing and which are available to us to utilize. Now, with respect to impunity, I believe we also need to remind the West that actually Israel is their problem. They impose the problem of Israel on the people of Palestine. The people of Palestine are not the enemies of Israeli people. It is Europeans, the West, that brought the problem to Palestine. And we need to be clear about that. And the reason that the apartheid state of Israel knows it can continue to commit genocide is because Europe permits it to do so. America permits it to do so. Those bombs are not manufactured by Israelis. They are brought by Americans, by the United Kingdom, by Germany and others. So we need to ask all civil society organizations in the countries that are arming Israel to be active in resistance. We need to strengthen the global movement.
It's been 700 days of trying to keep alive the spirit of activism and to remind everyone in South Africa and the world about your moral obligation to it. But the human instinct of just giving up, it's been 700 days. How do you locate that level of despondency in what our overall mission should be as citizens?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and Jazakallah for the opportunity to be part of this august gathering. Just to say, I would just like to reiterate what Sister Naledi has made mention, that we can never become despondent, we can never become discouraged. In our tradition, there is a verse in the Holy Quran, إِنَّهُ لَا يَيْأَسُ مِنْ رَوْحِ اللَّهِ إِلَّا الْقَوْمُ الْكَافِرُونَ, that losing hope in the mercy of the Almighty and becoming despondent is a trait of disbelief. You know, when you don't believe in the Almighty, then you become despondent. Anyone who believes in the power of the Almighty never becomes despondent. One of the names of the devil, as we are all aware in Islamic tradition, is Iblis. And Iblis comes from the word balas, which means despair. And nothing gives the devil greater joy than people become losing hope and becoming despair. They just lose hope. So I think one of the things that we have to do is just to continue. The Almighty, from our tradition, does not reward a person for success and failure. Success and failure, we believe, is in the hands of the Almighty. What the Almighty does reward is on the basis of effort. How much effort do you have done to be able to stand up for justice? In the Quran, there is a verse, قُلْ لَا يَسْتَوِي الْخَبِيثُ وَالطَّيِّبُ وَلَوْ أَعْجَبَكَ كَثْرَةُ الْخَبِيثِ, that evil and good, vice and virtue will never be equal, even if evil becomes prevalent in society. So anyone who stands up for justice and anyone who stands up for right, and we are going to be encouraged to stand up for right on the basis of the morality of our cause, on the basis of our conscience. And what is conscience? Conscience is that small inner voice that doesn't speak your language. In the Quran, there is a verse with regard to speaking about it, the soul lawama, that constantly rebukes you. And we have to continue with that. And as I just want to conclude that verse which I have said, that vice and virtue, evil and good can never be equal, even if vice and evil becomes dominant. So I think we can never become despondent. We have to continue. And also let me just take this example of saying that the Almighty rewards on effort, not necessarily on failure and success. And one of the reasons and one of the ways that we can bring justice alive is that we make justice such and so common that it becomes a groundswell within our communities, and from the foundation it goes upwards and it forces the government, as Sister had said with regard to the civil service and civil movement and civil activism, it forces the government to take into account the voice of the citizens.
To stay with you on this one, that Palestine is often rooted in a religious space as an obligation as Muslims, with Masjid al-Aqsa being the third holiest masjid. But to transcend that, to say that beyond religion and beyond politics, in a human level, it's an ethical obligation for us to reflect on that. Can you unpack the intersection of all these three imperatives, where there's a religious imperative, a political imperative, and then an ethical one?
There is no doubt that there is an Islamic dimension with regard to what is happening in Palestine and Jerusalem. Jerusalem, as we are aware, is the third holiest shrine in Islam. And the Masjid al-Aqsa, the Almighty has made mention with regard to its blessedness. And there are over 70 verses in the Holy Quran which speaks about the blessedness of the land. However, we all know that there is a common cause. The Quran calls upon us to come together on a common cause. قُلْ يَا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ تَعَالَوْا إِلَىٰ كَلِمَةٍ سَوَاءٍ بَيْنَنَا وَبَيْنَكُمْ. O people of the scriptures, let us come together on a common cause with regard to justice, with regard to morality. Let me give you an example from the prophetic life. Even at a time when, even before prophethood, there was a foreigner who came into the city of Mecca. He was treated unjustly, and he was robbed by the elite of the city. Something that happens today, and we can take an example from that. And the Prophet was part of an agreement known as Halful Fudul, the Pact of Fudul, in which people from different backgrounds got together and said, in future, if anyone is treated unjustly in the city, we as people who have done this step, we will come together and we will see to it and we will fight against it to see that this doesn't happen again. So beyond the Islamic aspect, there's also a common humanity. I mean, just to give an example, the Quran says, وَلَقَدْ كَرَّمْنَا بَنِي آدَمَ. We have granted respect and dignity to every human being, every child of Adam. Every child of Adam, irrespective of his background, is worthy of dignity. And today, what we do is we don't practice upon this verse because many a times we respect titles. We respect influence. We respect people of influence. We respect a person because he might be a scholar or he might be a doctor or a businessman. The Quran didn't tell you to respect, influence, or didn't tell you to respect individuals of influence. It told you to respect and give dignity to human beings. And I think there is enough common cause for humanity to work together for justice and morality across the society. And the Prophet did that when he came to Medina. He had 3 different groups to deal with. There were the Jewish tribes, there were the tribes of Medina, and the Prophet Muhammad brought them together, which in Mithaq Medina, the Pact of Medina, to work together closely for harmony, peace and justice. And it can be done and it should be done.
Shukran. Stephen, I know you are a veteran activist, you're a social commentator, the founder member of the Active Citizen Movement. You have been advocating for civic activism for and engagement for a very long time. So I want to put this to you. How do you then move from what Maulana is talking about, where we understand that it's our ethical and human obligation to enact it in everyday life? What does it mean to ethically stand up for justice and to do it, in this case, for the Palestinian struggle?
Yeah, I think I want to agree with Maulana that we need to be consistent, that undeniably there's an erosion of human values globally, internationally, here in this country. And this erosion of human values have contributed to a moral decay in society generally. And that we need to pursue truth, and truth really would lead to right conduct, lead to righteousness, to do the right thing all the time, even when no one is looking. And that truth, when it is translated into right conduct, into righteousness, okay, it creates, it imbues love. Love for everyone. Love for all living entities. And there are over 8,300,000 living entities in the world. And that we need to treat everyone, irrespective of race, color, creed, with love. And when there is love, you automatically have peace. And when you are at peace with yourself, you are in harmony with everything around you. So I would want to submit that we are spiritual beings enjoying a physical experience, and that we are one people, that we are one global family. In my faith, the Hindu faith, we refer to this as Vasudeva Kutumbakam. The whole world is one family, one people, one being, one consciousness. And we make no difference between race, color, creed, or religion. That the struggle in this country, which was premised, or our current constitution of the Republic of South Africa, is premised on the values that were enshrined in the Freedom Charter. And what does the Freedom Charter talk to? That South Africa belongs to all who live in it. That all shall enjoy equal rights. That there shall be free and compulsory education for all. That the land shall be shared amongst those who work it. Okay? So it was a huge struggle that we waged for over 300 years of colonialism of a special type. So I would want to agree with Dr. Naledi Pandor when she argues that we need a global civil society movement that is united around common ideals. But we don't have that, okay? In our country, in our struggle for human rights, for justice, okay, we coalesced across civil society. So here we had the lead organization, the African National Congress, born on the 8th of January 1912, and the organization was able to mobilize people across color, across class, across race. So ours was truly a national democratic revolution that brought all people together, recognized the common humanity of all. So it wasn't about black liberation only, it was liberating all the people in our country. And that liberation came in 1994, but we still live in a society, okay, with the triple challenges of inequality, unemployment, underdevelopment, the kind of corruption and malfeasance. And therefore, this particular event, going back to ethics, is so fundamentally important because it talks to every one of us, it talks to our conscience, that we need to do the right thing, engage in right conduct, in what we in the Hindu faith call dharma.
Thank you very much for that. Nkululeko Mthombo, I'm going to come to you. You work in the intersection of governance, civil society, you're also a writer. And so when Dr. Pandor talks about this need for coordination, right, it also means that ordinary people have to avail themselves to be part of something structured and coordinated. Talk to me about what, or the type of activism that's going to give us this level of coherence in fighting for the Palestinian cause.
Just testing? Oh, perfect, this works. Thank you for the opportunity. I think to start off, we must first understand and accept that the type of oppression we see is a coordinated effort itself. There's a reason it is said that our oppression doesn't end until the liberation of the Palestinian people. There's a moral issue to it, but there's also a genuine, just a 1+1 thing. I think Prof has already highlighted how, at a civic basis, it's very difficult to find people who don't interact with these issues, at least at the progressive level that we are. That Palestine ought to be free, ought to be recognized. The Palestinian people are facing a genocide and it should be responded to accordingly. So when we are looking at the international response to Palestine, it is a coordinated dictatorship by the elite, telling us that no, we are going to tell you who's going to live and who's going to die and whose life is worth what. And at the point where all of us can gather here and tell the whole world that you're talking rubbish, and they're telling us no, we must understand that we too are facing a coordinated force. We are not facing individuals, we are not facing Bibi, we are not facing one Zionist here and there. There's a coordinated effort that is to the detriment of all humanity, that is telling us who gets to live, who gets to die, whose life is worth what, and we must accept all those price ranges that have been given to us, or else we are somehow on the fringes of rationality or of the West or of democracy. So in understanding and accepting this, we then go back to the movement that led to our own liberation as South Africans, that with the little power we have, where my feet are, I am going to defy this system with everything I have. Whether it is the cold drink that I buy, or the places that I frequent, or the people that I will and will not debate with on certain issues. At every single point, I think in the former movement it's called to leave no quarter. There's no corner where Zionism is safe. There is no quarter where Zionism is being entertained. And this has to be a globally coordinated effort, as has been spoken to by the minister. So at a higher range, there has to be, I think the BDS movement has already been highlighted at a very wide scale, something that had worked for us. I do think that the global coordination of the BDS movement, and not only in what to avoid, but also what to support, because the Palestinian people they need us in many, from the kufias that we buy to even, I remember there was an Israeli cooking blog around traditional Israeli food. All of it was Palestinian. And it's just like, you don't get to rewrite this thing. And so from the media we consume, the social media posts we like, to the food that we do support and we don't support, at a high level scale, we need to know that type of information. We need mapping, we need information, we need to know who is going to do what in every corner. But where you are right now, your RAND is extremely powerful, and especially your social media account, it's an amazing tool to tell the right story. So that's where I'll begin.
So obviously, we obviously have Dr. Pandor as someone who represents all of our aspirations to speak truth to power, and many of us here look at people like that, look at Prof. Friedman, but there's a part of me that says Dr. Pandor should be chilling with her grandchildren at this point. And that you have now fought two struggles for humanity on the behalf of all of us. So how then can our generation take the mantle from people like Prof and Dr. Pandor?
Funny enough, I had this conversation not too long from now, and it was from a primary school in Soweto, and they were singing struggle songs in the morning, and it was both devastating and encouraging that in South Africa at least, our inheritance is a more sharper resistance. I don't have a house from my parents, I don't have a bank account to tap into, but I know how to resist more acutely because of what they've done. So in my family specifically, coming from a lineage of people who were part of the armed struggle and the international resistance, it's pick up where they left off. We're not reinventing the wheel here. Do you think that, Mam Laleli, coming from two struggles, to say that you represent all our aspirations is a bit unfair, or it's too much to put on your shoulders? But we are standing on the shoulders of giants, and we can see further because of you. So I think we must first begin where everyone has left off. Carry that up. I think that there's this tradition of wiping the slate clean that our generation likes to do and starting from over. We're not. We are carrying on a work that's already begun. But secondly, we must also accept that we can see further. We do have better technology. We do have better lessons learned. And with our generations, how we carry on is to integrate everything that has happened with the world that we see now, because we must obviously always respond to the space that we're in and not where we decided we should be. Yeah.
Thank you very much for that. Irfan Magera, you obviously led many youth movements, you're an educator, civic organizer, and so I want to tap into the whataboutism. It's hard because if I am talking about Gaza today, I also need to talk about what's happening in the West Bank. And if I talk about what's happening in the West Bank, I have to talk about what's happening in the prisons of Israel. If I talk about that, then I also need to be talking about those who had to flee the Nakba 70 years ago and are sitting all over the world. And if I talk about that, then what about Sudan, where there's a persisting genocide that's going on? And if I talk about Sudan, then I have to talk about the DRC, and by the end of it, I am exhausted. So as someone who is engaged in all of this, I cannot cope with the exhaustion of there's so much of affliction in the world. How do you navigate through all of this and still kind of do something about it?
Thank you so much, and thanks to the panelists. A very difficult question. But whataboutism exists because of the oppressor. The narrative that have been pushed forward is that you can't care for this, and you can only care for this. You can't care for all the other struggles. I get the exhaustion, but I first want to attempt to tackle the question around the narrative, because it's been seeded that you can only be pro-Palestinian, but you can't be pro the fight against imperialism in the Congo, and you can't be fighting against what's happening in the long prolonged war in Sudan, and many other struggles. So one is, we do need a narrative repair, because Zionism and Zionists are coordinated, like my panelists said, and they will continue to push us aside and divide us further amongst ourselves. On the side of exhaustion, it's real. We've seen burnout amongst people in this room. People have been hospitalized because you do too much too quickly. The challenge, however, is we're in this together. We don't have to be killing ourselves in order for the struggle to be waged. And by that, I mean solidarity is showing up in how and wherever you can. If you can show up today, you've done so, and you need then ask the question, where next? What next do I have to do? I think part of the struggle is also a personal one, and making sure you maintain the struggle of your own health and your own consciousness and your own well-being, but not to let that be, it's a part, again, you'd want to do this from a lens where, it's easy for me to just leave Coke, or it's easy for me to promote well-being and I check out of the system completely, but that's not enough. Struggle is waged with sacrifice. Sacrifice means we're going to have to give a little for the betterment of the whole. And I think more and more young people are seeing that struggle as a means for them to do a whole lot more. And I just want to get a quick sense, how many of you here know about the global Sumud flotilla that's happening? Yeah? How many of you are inspired by it? Okay? How many of you would have liked to be part of it? Excellent. Now imagine if we all pushed and we all got on boats and we all found our way there months ago. This wouldn't have been a situation of prolonged crisis. We would have had millions of us, free people of the world, who are still pushing the struggle further. Kanita, lastly, I think part of the problem that I'm faced with amongst young people in organizing, especially in the South African context, is hunger, unemployment. Why should I care about this struggle all across the board, across the seas, when I am hungry today? The struggle is not helping me get food or getting a job. And I think it's our duty as conscious beings to make sure that we tie the knots. The reason why those Zionist companies can operate, Rob Hersov and the gambling companies, is because we've allowed them to do so freely. And they prey on the most vulnerable people in our townships, forcing young people to think that they don't have, the struggle is not shared. It's still only my struggle for now. And I think part of the 4 pillars that was mentioned is we're not doing enough to do the consciousness raising work and to connect the dots on where the corruption is happening, how is it tied to my own freedom in this country. And I'll end it on that.
Before I bring the conversation back this side, Morana, I want to ask you a much more pointed question. Every Friday in the Jummah Khutbah, Imams cite an ayah in Surah Al-Nahl where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Inna Allah ya'murukum bil-'adl. Allah commands you with justice, wa ihsan, and to do good. And the ayah continues. So if I have to take this direct commandment for justice, how do me and the panel here and everyone sitting here, how do I do more for Gaza? And how do I do it in that spirit of an injunction to justice and to ihsan, which is doing good?
Jazakallah for that, Dr. Cook. There is no doubt that justice is the hallmark, I think, of every religion, and more so, I can speak with authority from the Islamic perspective. And the verse that you quote is a very important verse. Inna Allah ya'muru bil-'adl. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands you to do justice. And in another verse in the Holy Quran, لَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلُنَا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمُ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. Every prophet that came with a divine mandate. And the divine mandate was to make an effort لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ, to establish people upon justice. Now obviously it is a challenge to say that, okay, these are the commands. How do we bring it into our daily life? How do we bring it into our community, into our society, into the broader community we are living in, to impact upon Gaza? I mean, I was told also that one of the things is that back to ethics is not only about Gaza, it is primarily one of the manifestations of justice, one of the greatest manifestations is about Gaza. There is no doubt that is perhaps the litmus test with regard to oppression and injustice and fighting for justice in today's time. However, let us look at ethics. I mean, even in our own society, in our own small community and society, as my colleague had said, that there is a moral erosion. What do we do with regard to gender-based violence? What do we do with regard to substance abuse that has finished and ravished our community and our youth? What do we do with regard to alcohol abuse? Perhaps one of the greatest abuse that is inflicting the people in the township, when there is so much of unemployment and hunger, and the little bit that you've got is being used for alcohol. So once you start building a momentum with regard to working towards justice in small communities and societies, a ground swell will emerge that will, inshallah, go on and going on into a bigger way. I would like to take the opportunity to say, we sometimes need to seize the opportunity. And sometimes wherever you look at history, change was brought not necessarily initially by a great amount of people. Sometimes there was a person who had an inspiration, had a motivation, few people got together. You look at, for example, and I'm sure I'm just, because I'm an Islamic scholar, so I'm quoting from our tradition, the people of the cave. There's an entire verse and a chapter in the Holy Quran which few youngsters got together to fight against an oppressor. There were 7 youngsters. But they made such an impact that a chapter is named after them. And there were 6 young people. Let me give you another example. The Prophet Muhammad was looking for other pastures because of the persecution in Mecca. And he used to go around at the time of Hajj, at the time of pilgrimage, speaking to people. 6 people took up his cause who came from Medina. Right? There were only 6 people who came. And they said, we will bring Iman and we will bring faith in him. And from there, we will take it back to our city. That city, no one can think about a journey to Saudi Arabia without going to the city of the Prophet, which came about because of the effort of 6 people. So we need to say, let us seize the opportunity. Yes, Gaza is happening. We can talk about it in a broader scale. But from an individual point of view, let us seize the opportunity, do what we can, and from there, a lot of things will grow. And I think many things that have happened because of smaller group of people who inspired many others.
Shukran for that one. Dr. Pandro, moving forward now, where are you sort of concentrating your efforts on day 700? What is it that you think for yourself is going to guide you, just as a means of inspiration for people who are looking for a roadmap for themselves?
One of the things I've become very involved in is internationally trying to secure funding for humanitarian organizations that support the people of Palestine. So I spend a lot of my time traveling and speaking to different communities in different parts of the world, encouraging them to continue to give. I do that with organizations that I know are honestly providing aid in Palestine. So this is what I'm doing. So unfortunately, I'm still behaving like a minister of international relations because I'm all over the world. But I'm also trying to write. And of course, by some strange misfortune or fortune, it's all in Allah's will, I was selected by the trustees of the foundation formed by Mr. Mandela to become chair of the board of trustees. Now you will recall that Mr. Mandela famously said South Africa will not be completely free until Palestine is free. So, by some strange happening, given the role I've been assigned by fate, I suddenly find myself in the Legacy Foundation of Nelson Mandela. So I hope that through our work, we will continue the legacy.
Thank you very much for that, Dr. Prof, you send out on a daily basis a selection of the most important writings on Palestine that to a few hundred, I don't know how many of us we are that get your emails. So what Prof does, he scans the web and sends the most important reading material on Palestine every single day. And by getting that, I was inspired to say, okay, what can I do with the little experience that I have? And I thought, okay, in the media houses that I work for, I am not able to actually give a voice to people who are either prejudiced for standing up against Palestine or actively part of it. And that's how I started the Debrief Network, to say, let's start something to give a platform. And you know, at first our videos would get 100 views, and now we're sitting at 20 and 30 and 40,000 views. But the point is that from getting those messages, those emails every day, I realized, okay, there's something I can do too. Prof, what are you doing, and how can you advocate for other people to do as well?
Okay, well, first of all,
Yeah.
first of all, I'm not going to claim that other people do. First of all, I'm doing it One of the ways that in the thought about it is what is called lawfare, okay? And the South African Jewish Board of Deputies, which is a bit of a misnomer because it should be the South African Zionist squad, they are taking all sorts of people to court for speaking the truth. And what some of us are doing is that we are acting as expert witnesses and supporting people who support the Palestinian cause. And this whole battle for free speech for people who support Palestine is really important. But the other thing that I am doing, which might be of interest, which might help, I got drafted onto the committee of the South African chapter of an international anti-apartheid movement. Anti-Israeli apartheid. And so it's mainly a federation of organizations. Some of the organizations represented here will be part of our group. And what we are working on internationally at the moment is what Dr. Pandor was talking about, what Dr. Lepp was talking about to a certain extent, which is that we are trying to solidify an international movement. But I think that the question of what people can do and what we are working at the moment here is this. First of all, I think that if you are an activist, if you are really an activist on this issue, then once again, I listened very carefully to what Nkulaku was saying, and I think she really put her finger on it, because we very often make the mistake of assuming that because we are isolating the Israeli state, because we are boycotting, etc., everybody else is. And unfortunately, that's not true. And we have a very serious job of work to do to make sure, and it's obvious basic stuff which we need to work on. We want people to boycott Israeli products. We need to make very sure we know where those products are, particularly when they are snuck in as non-Israeli products, which also happens. What some of the other panelists were saying, I think, is important, that people have to be convinced that this is an issue. I am absolutely convinced that the vast majority of South Africans support the Palestinian cause, are horrified, which is with what is being done to them. But we have to do the work of getting them on board. And yes, people say, I'm hungry, I don't have time for this. But the solution to that is that you have to integrate it into the other concerns which people have, and it works time and time again. I mean, we have a shack dwellers organization in this country, Abashali Basamjun Goro, who are very active on the Palestine issue. Their members are desperate for accommodation, but they realize that it's part of a bigger issue. So I think that each one of us, you know, we can't ought to be complacent in this country. The biggest mistake we could make to say is, yes, well, our government took the Israeli state to court, it supports the Palestinian cause. All of that is very fragile. Politics is changing in this country all the time, and it doesn't matter what the majority of South Africans think. We could very well land ourselves into a situation where the politics is very different. So there's a huge job for us as far as that is concerned. And the other huge job we have is that, yes, it's great that the government took the Israeli state to court, but there are a lot of other issues which need to be looked at. People are focusing at the moment on supply of coal, which can be used to kill Palestinians, all sorts of other trade routes, etc. There's a lot for people to do here. And I think that what we need to do is to make sure that there's a role for what I often call easy involvement. In other words, you're not telling people to put their life on hold, but there's something everybody can do to ensure that this groundswell grows and that the Palestinian people get the support that they need.
Thank you very much. I'm going to come to you. So, you spoke about not reinventing the wheel. What are you doing? And is there anything that you need support from ordinary people in helping you in any of your endeavors?
So currently, yes, I've been involved in a lot of communities doing a lot of the work around BDS specifically, which is the Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions movement. I apologize because I assume these phrases, we use them as if everyone knows. But yes, Boycott, Divestment and the Sanctions speak to the products that are made or benefit Israel, and speaking to us boycotting either boycotting buying those products as a whole, or using our international weight to lobby for sanctions or divestment in the Israeli state. I think what I would need help with, and I think all of us need help with, is the flip side of that, the replacement. So at the point where I am boycotting Coca-Cola, what am I buying? I know there was a boycott of, I believe it was Nestle on chocolate slavery, but then there was a replacement chocolate that was made there. So I think we need a list of who to support in as much as we need a list of who to boycott, firstly. And then secondly, I did want to just touch very briefly on the issue of the whataboutism. And I think it's a point of great emphasis that we need to put in our activism, that if the guns are bought from the same place, it's the same oppressor at the end of the day. Whether these people are claiming to be fighting over land, if it benefits monetarily the same people, which are the same people supplying the weaponry for whatever war we're in, whether it's Sudan, whether it's Congo, whether it's Palestine, if the same people are benefiting from the war, you are facing the same oppressor every single time. And lastly, I think what I would like all of us to come together on is the issue of radical community. It's not, and this is not a call out of any sort, but it is, the racial profiling of this room is not by mistake. It was manufactured like that and is continuing in that sense. And the only way even our own apartheid South Africa becomes defeated is when we cross the railroad tracks, when we cross the second bridge and we cross the Soweto highway, and we find out that we are actually the same people. So, bring your white friend, your Jewish friend, your colored friend, your black friend, eat with them, sit with them, find out their struggle, because at that dinner table you'll find out that it's the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Irfan, you want to reflect on the same question?
You know, the thing with being comrades is that this is the same type of thinking and that we've come from.
Let me pause it there. What has been your struggles, your personal struggles, and how you overcame it? Just in case that there's someone probably can relate to that.
Sure. So, an interesting thing is I have come from this movement, the pro-Palestine movement. You mentioned yourself, you started probably when you were 6. The PSA Youth League was my first home for real activism, organizing, doing mobilization work. And I've spent the years in many different forms doing that. In the last year, being attacked by Zionists, and the ones that I've mentioned are very interesting and much less compared to you, Dr. Bando, but it was lonely in many ways. When the Zionists attack you, they spew all sorts of rhetoric and call you an anti-Semite. You become somebody who, is this real? Is this who I am? And so I say this from a perspective that the community needs to stand up. This radical community idea is about standing up for each other when it matters most and making sure you show up not just physically today. I think, again, not just the racial dynamic, but the class dynamic in this room. We have to go beyond that and understand how do we make the activism more radical and militant so that, like globally, more and more people want to come because they feel like that militancy is actually going to bring about change. So that type of investment, monetary investment as well, that I think many activists need as a means to get to the next stage of their activism.
Thank you very much. We're going to open up for questions. We're going to take, we'll take 2 questions and then see how far that takes us. The lady on this side, you raised your hand, 1, and the gentleman in front, and then we'll come to you as number 3. Okay, so if you can just ask a question to not do a very lengthy preamble, we're just short on time, so let's see how far we can go. To the lady, if you could stand.
Sorry, I'm not going to ask a question. I'm going to give a couple of suggestions about how we can amplify our struggle. The first thing is that the South African Parliament voted by 73% majority to close the Israeli embassy. They did that, I think, if I remember correctly, this was near the end of 2023, so it was very early on in the genocide. So we put out a petition on Amanda Moby to call on the executive to implement that democratic parliamentary decision and close down the Israeli embassy. Please can I ask you to sign that petition? Just put in close Israeli embassy on the Moby and just share as widely as you can with as many people as you can and sign that petition, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Gentleman on this side.
A warm greetings to all of our fellow speakers, friends from various faith, language, and cultures. I'm emphasizing that. Assalamu alaikum. This is a question that has been particularly pertinent to Musa, a movement for uniting South Africa, saying given South Africa's history of apartheid, and this is by the way to all the speakers, and its moral voice on global justice, yet facing corruption, inequality, and moral complacency at home today. How can reflecting on the steadfastness and the resilience of the Palestinian people help us reset? And I'm using the word active ethics. This is what this place is even about today in our society. If we could design, and all of us could help on this, a moral GPS inspired by these lessons and many of the lessons that you said today, what would this particular civic governance where civil society collectively commits to justice, accountability, human dignity, including active participation in politics and economics and in other sectors, how can individuals, communities, institutions turn this reflection into a concrete program, initiatives, and practices that makes this moral civic awakening a real one for all of us to participate in?
Thank you very much. So we'll take a lady behind, and then we'll just bring it back to the audience. There's a lady behind.
Thank you so much. Erin McCandless from the University of Johannesburg, and I'm very grateful to be here. It just reduces the pain in my heart a little bit to feel the solidarity, so thank you. My question is about, I think, yes, we need a global civil society movement, but I wouldn't rule out the importance of having progressive states, political blocs. We need actors at all levels to be joining this movement. But one of the challenges I think that I'm picking up at the moment, and I'm trying to use my voice to fight and organize and so forth, but I think there's incredible lack of clarity and agreement about one state or two state solution, particularly amongst activists. And so if everybody's working at odds, then, obviously it needs to be Palestinians deciding what is most important for them, but in this state of what the situation is right now, is it even possible? And is it, I personally struggle to think a one-state solution is possible, but the example of South Africa is always brought. Obviously, however, the Palestinians are not going to be in power in a one-state solution. So please give your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I just take that question and the question that's in front of me and put it to both of you, Prof. and Dr. Fando, and then the broader question we'll just open it up to the rest of the panel as we're conscious of time. The second question is, when do you think we'll have a ceasefire, and do you think Israel will be held accountable by the ICJ? So if you could just reflect on both of those questions, Doctor.
I find it difficult to hazard as to when there will be a ceasefire. I think the situation has reached a level where we need a massive decision, a bold one by the United Nations on enforcement. We have to have a mission deployed with agreement of the Security Council that there would be a mission of UN designated soldiers who would be armed with the right to respond and whose remit would be enforcement of a ceasefire. Without that, I don't think we're going to have success. And I don't know when that will happen. On the solution as to the nature and form of the state, I think Palestinian people must decide that. But at present, the only international law position are the resolutions agreed to in the General Assembly of the United Nations. And the key at the moment solution, the resolution most member states hold to, is the formal position of a two-state solution. There is no resolution on a one-state solution. And if we say we respect international law, we have to speak to that resolution, because there isn't anything else. Otherwise, we're creating our own decision as to what should happen. But in my view, the eventual decision must be by the Palestinian people. And I really hope that the Palestinian authorities, the political forces within Palestine will end the factions and come together and establish one unit that would be the one that shapes freedom.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Yeah, it's very, I'll come to the one-state, two-state issue in a moment. It's very difficult at the moment to see how this is going to stop. And weirdly enough, and I'm talking about the short term, in the long term it's going to stop when the forces, anti-Zionist forces become stronger than Zion. It's as simple as that. But I think in the short term, the weird thing may be that and I'm talking about very short-term stuff, Trump's own base is beginning to rebel against it. You have all these kind of right-wing voices saying, this is enough already. I think it's not inconceivable that in the next while or so they'll say, look, this looks bad, stop it, we'll try some other way of addressing Palestinians, etc. Unfortunately, that's what we're reduced to, because the kind of citizen activism I'm talking about is going to win in the day, but it doesn't win in 2 weeks, or 3 weeks. As far as the one-state, two-state thing is concerned, okay, I'm for years, I nailed my Palestine about days ago, I'm a one-stater. But I take Dr. Pando's point that, towards the end, and she will remember this, towards the end of the fight against apartheid here, one of the most irritating features was people in New York or Washington saying, well, we don't think you're liberated enough, we've decided you're not liberated enough, even if you think you are. So, to sit here in a university office and tell the Palestinians what they should accept, I think is not appropriate. But there's one point about this which I think needs to be emphasized in our campaigning, which is that whenever a Western politician stands up and says, we're in favor of the two-state solution, what they're doing is saying they want negotiations, but they're also determining the outcome of negotiations. You can talk to each other as long as you come up with a two-state solution. And that's nonsense, because then you're not saying you want negotiation at all. So the position has to be, I think the principal position has to be, we want a settlement which is acceptable to the Palestinian people. And the Palestinian people will decide what that settlement is.
Yeah. If you can reflect on behalf of the panelists, we obviously spoke a lot to that question. But essentially what the gentleman was asking about the concretization of what we were speaking about now, if you could just reflect on that.
Yeah, I think that the fundamental issue is we need to ensure that we mobilize, we organize civil society. There is a level of fragmentation. We need to solidify, cement the relationships across different sectors. And I think that the groundswell that Mulana was talking about is possible. We did that. The fall of apartheid didn't happen, it didn't come like manna from heaven. You have to organize, And mobilization and organization is not an easy thing. The struggle for human rights and democracy in this country happened not just by political organizations, but through active mobilization, organization, building organizational unity through organs of civil society. It's absolutely critical to find a political solution, and that is not going to come from politicians, from governments, etc. Ordinary people need to mobilize, to recognize that there's an evil that is being perpetrated here, there's an injustice that is happening, and that it affects everyone, and that the struggle really has to embrace everyone. And the kinds of actions that we need to take around bringing solidarity need to be meaningful, need to be, in a way in which ordinary people can relate to. So that's my take on mobilization, organization.
Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone who has been here today, and to the panelists, Dr. Naledi Pandor, Professor Stephen Friedman, Mulana Ibrahim Bam, Siva Naidu, Irfan Mangela, and my sister Nkululeko Tambo. Thank you very much for your participation. I think we all have a game plan. We all know what we are going to do. I know what I'm going to do. And I would like to say that wherever you see someone doing something that you are not currently doing, extend a hand of support. If you can't join them, help them in the very least. Thank you very much to the organizers, like Mohammed Baba, to Maulana Kola, to Yusuf Patel, to everyone who's made this day possible. I think coming together and having a conversation is the baseline for change. If we don't talk and if we don't envision the change, we're not going to see the change. So thank you very much, and shukran for having me today. Bye.
I'm going to ask to get
just to remain on stage, we're going to have someone by the name of Lyra Johnson come up and challenge you to do more, I think. So Lyra, if you could come up in the meanwhile. But we've also got Zahra Patel who will be handing out gifts to the panelists just to thank them for their time. So Zahra, if you could come up. And we have, apart from what the organizers have given as gifts, there's a special gift from Turkey that has come for our former Minister Pando. And we've also got fried onions that has been spontaneously given by Zedunisha, who is deaf and runs this as a business to support her family. And I think that's a message to all of the panelists that you need to get cooking. So let's have the handover. In the meanwhile, Dr. Nita came up earlier to speak about the children that he's bringing to South Africa from Gaza and the need for a support network. And we've got Social Intifada, Khalid Bauda, who will be taking in via their social media accounts and their website, so you can email socialintifada@gmail.com or you can DM them on all of various social media sites if you are interested in being part of that support network. This is a network to support the children of Gaza who are coming to South Africa for medical assistance. And in particular, they are looking for mothers, women to assist, but it is open to everyone else as well, including children, because there are children who are coming down, and this is to offer social support to them. So, over to you, Lyra.
Okay, good day everyone. It is indeed an honor and a privilege to address you today on an issue that is close and dear to my heart, namely ethics and morality and how it influences who we are and what we do. So I'm Lyra Johnson, a grade 11 student from Westbury Secondary School, and I reside in Westbury. As I've listened to the distinguished panelists amongst you, Dr. Naledi Pando, Prof. Friedman, Nonkululeko, as well as Mulana Bam, I am in awe with your leadership and your contributions to our society. Today I stand before you with a plea that stems from the area in which I reside and the school that I attend. Many of you might know it, but possibly for all of the wrong reasons. To me, ethics and morality are the backbone of any society, guiding our actions and decisions to ensure that we treat others with respect, dignity, and fairness. To be ethical simply means to adhere to a set of principles that promote the well-being and rights of all individuals, regardless of their background, religion, culture, or even their circumstances. We have heard the panelists discuss the Zionist occupation and how it is a stark example of a failure in ethics and morality. Especially where one people defame another and deem it as acceptable. In my opinion, that is totally unacceptable. Furthermore, when ethics and morality collapse, we lose the essence of being human. Again, I want to reiterate and concur with the panelists that the Zionist-Palestinian conflict is a stark example of the grave imbalance in ethics and morality that we face in our everyday lives beyond Palestine. As a youth person and a future leader, I am compelled to speak out against the injustices. Thank you. To speak out against these injustices. The Zionist government's actions towards innocent Palestinians are unacceptable and demand a strong response from the global community. However, it's equally important to acknowledge that ethics and morality aren't just global issues. They're also reflected in our local communities, which we do see daily. I, as Lyra Johnson, believe that I am a good person and I do know good people from my community. And they want to love and fend for their families in an ethical and decent manner. However, they need support, they need the opportunity and the strength to be able to address these temptations within our communities and within our country. In Westbury and Euclid in particular, we face numerous challenges that test our moral fabric. The drug issue, for instance, It has devastating effects, which we have all witnessed. It has its devastating effects on individuals, family members, and the community at large. I've also watched substance abuse contribute to crime, poverty, and health problems, cultivating a cycle of suffering. Gangsterism is another pressing concern, often encouraged through poverty, unemployment, and a lack of opportunities. The senseless killings fueled by gang violence have become all too prominent in our communities, instilling a spirit of fear, which many people are scared to tackle. Additionally, alcohol and domestic abuse alongside teenage pregnancies are symptoms of deeper social issues that require attention and immediate action. Unemployment and minimum government support aggravates these problems. It leaves many without hope or an opportunity for a decent and better life, as well as an ethical life. Until we address these issues, we will not change our society. So, it is within this context that I plead to you, our leaders. We need leadership and guidance. So what you need to do is, firstly, you need to listen to us. Just because we are young does not mean that we are not equipped enough to make change through our decisions. We need you to hear. We have our ears and eyes on the ground, and you don't. You don't see, so we need you to work hand in hand with us to bring about the change that is very much needed. Another point is, we look at you and we see how you quibble amongst yourselves on matters while Rome is burning. So we need guidance. We need firm, inclusive, and decisive leadership. You guys make decisions for us without discussing it with us. But what you need to do is remember, we are the 21st century child with fresh ideas and out-of-the-box solutions. So, therefore, it is my view that it is now our time as the new generation. The social evils mentioned are not unique to Westbury and New Glen. Yet, I'd like to invite you to come into our communities and see how we live our everyday lives. In my humble opinion, these challenges need to be addressed through a different approach, one that puts ethics and morality at the forefront of each and every solution. By promoting equality in education, equal access to opportunities, as well as community support, we can empower individuals from communities to break free from cycles and notions of violence as well as of poverty. Strengthening law enforcement and providing stable rehabilitation programs can also help combat gangsterism and substance abuse in our local communities. Westbury faces numerous challenges that impact the well-being and safety of its residents, particularly its youth. Substance abuse is also rampant, contributing to crime and social problems, with some residents even aspiring to become drug lords. Furthermore, allegations of police corruption and complicity in crime have undermined trust in law enforcement, making it challenging to address these issues effectively. The lack of well-resourced recreational facilities also limits opportunities for residents, aggravating these social problems while plaguing our communities. I believe that as a society, we must recognize the importance of ethics and morality in shaping our decisions. By working together to address these issues, we can create a better world for future generations. A world where every individual has the opportunity to thrive and reach their full potential, without having to face discrimination, abuse, or even constant judgment. My concluding remarks are that in South Africa, and my local community in particular, we have a unique opportunity to rebuild our society on the principles of social justice, of equality, and of compassion. This can be done through prioritizing ethics and morality. We can produce productive youth filled with humanity who will contribute to the growth and prosperity of our nation. It is time for a new approach, one that puts humanity at the center and ensures that government will correctly reflect our values of empathy, respect, dignity as a country. Thank you for listening, guys.
I'm going to ask the panelists again just to remain because we have Irfan with some closing remarks on taking us forward and how do we make whatever we've heard here practical.
Thanks, Zakira. It's very difficult to go after a young person who has that much of passion. It's left us hopeful that this initiative will seek to engage you as a student leader, as a young leader, and take it forward. Firstly, thank you to the panelists for being the thinkers and giving us a shared experiences and analysis. But to all of you for making it out today. We've had at least 400 to 500 people here, probably more. This initiative is not meant to be an organization, or it's meant to actually bring people together consistently to engage the question about ethics, ethical leadership. And the theory of change says that if we can develop that, if you can tackle the crisis of a leadership that is no longer rooted itself in ethics, we can then start changing the way the world works and how the systems work. And so we want this to be individual, family, community, organization run, but with the strategic objectives of building and anchoring ethics in our everyday life. And so the idea of living out your ethics, of how the choice you make between Coke and McDonald's versus something else, or the choice of, we saw this at Relish not so long ago, of violence being meted out. We don't want that scenario to play out. We want us to be holding hands in solidarity rather than breaking down and dividing further. So step one is the foundation and core governance of this movement, to build a steering committee. And for those of you who want to be part of it, please reach out. We are keen and interested to build a diverse group of a steerco and not an elected leadership, because we really just want this to be an initiative to drive further strategy and resource mobilization. Develop a values charter that we can hold up to ourselves, hold ourselves accountable to, but also take to our schools, our religious institutions, and organizations, so that there's a common and shared view on what does this ethical leadership require of each of us. We want to have dialogues and mini dialogues in our communities, not in this format, in the format of our kitchen tables, our braais, but also in a very circular space, so that everyone engages equally and can and speak from their shared lived experience. Step two looks at local engagement and multiplication. How do we turn 500 into 5 million? And how do we turn that 5 million into an entire country and then the global change? And so part of this work is what Kanita is doing around storytelling and capturing stories of change, that it helps us showcase that actually there is ethical leadership being displayed. There are communities who are showing up for themselves in the face of all this injustice. From there on is developing this network. There's already groups doing healing work, psychiatrists, psychologists coming together to provide support for communities who are faced with gang violence. Just a reiteration that every hour on average, Israel has killed a child. It's not just the children that are affected, but the parents who are also going through these levels of trauma. But equally, in a place like Cape Town, 63 children have been killed just in the last 5 months. So trauma exists in our communities, and we want to find ways in how we connect this kind of support together. We want to hold this annual community day so that we can reflect on the progress we've made. Because this is a commitment we've all done, to come through today, but to say, in a year's time, have we advanced the question of ethics in our spaces, in our schools, in our madrasas, etc. Thereafter, roll out solidarity campaigns, which looks at not just Palestine as the only question, but connecting that to the food hunger crisis, the climate crisis, the crisis we have on multiple fronts, and showing up and what does that solidarity look like. A big chunk of this is train the trainer work. So we're developing a toolkit that easily is understood and that can be rolled out. So if you have this type of expertise, please do reach out so that you can contribute to that toolkit that will help us advance the question around ethical leadership. And what that will help us do is develop a pipeline of ethical leaders so that it's not just Manaledi Pando or Prof. Friedman who are the only ones speaking from authority, who've led and become symbols of resistance. But every community will have thousands or hundreds of people stepping up into that same role and same moral respect and leadership. The components of these programs, like I mentioned, crisscross business, it crisscrosses religious institutions, faith-based, but more so in our homes and in our social space. Lastly, it looks at spiritual rootedness, not just ritualism, so not just carrying out the performance, but actually being genuine about how we connect spiritually as the human race to each other. Zakira, on the last bit is an M&E, and for us to do so, I got the word from my comrade to say that we please participate in your local national dialogues that will be happening. There's much debate about it, but from our end as young people is to say that's a space of convening, of actually getting people together to solve community issues and not waiting for government or a political organization or an NGO to come solve it for us. We have power as people, and this initiative is meant to answer the fact that people standing together can achieve change. And we remain hopeful that in spite of so much despair and destruction, ethical leadership, ethical citizenship can rise out of it and change the world for the better. Shukran. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that, Irfan. And we want to thank all of the panelists here. You've kept you seated here for a very long time, so thanks for that as well. We have here with us on stage people who represent the progressive tradition that Conita spoke about. And in the audience here earlier, I saw Ilse Fischer, the daughter of Bram Fischer. And you see that long-lasting tradition of progressive politics in South Africa stemming from here through the organizations, Active Citizens Movement, PSA, MUSA, etc., all the way up to the various sectors represented here, the political sector, academia, media, civil society, the religious sector. And as the rules-based order crumbles around us globally, as we face problems locally, I think that this is a new call to action that we need to fulfill and step up to. So thank you very much. I'm going to call up Yusuf Patel, who is really the driving force behind this initiative to provide the vote of thanks. And as he comes up, a few more things from my side because he is going to close the program. One is the Social Intifada exhibition that is at the back of the wall here. Please do spend some time looking at it, putting your name to some of the initiatives. You can visit their stall as well, and if you would like to get involved, there's an opportunity to do so. To all of the 90s kids who are here, I know you all watch TikTok videos that talk about nostalgia of the 90s, where you see what it was like living in the 90s and waking up on a Saturday watching cartoons and feeling as if there's no problems in the world. I think we can safely say that those times are now gone. After October 7th, the world has fundamentally changed, and that means we have to change with it. And sometimes we may ask ourselves, why me, why this time? And those who know Lord of the Rings, there's a quote there that it doesn't matter that we are in these difficult times, but it's what we do with the time that is given to us. And for those who know Surah Al-As in the Quran, it speaks to the same thing, that we have to do good with the time that we are given. So from Al-Fasha in Sudan, to Gaza, a Zaytun neighborhood, to Westbury and Nuclear, and to Emerentia, let's see how we can step up to the plate and fulfill our duty as ethical leaders. Yusuf, over to you. Jazakallah khair.
Thank you so much, Zakira. You know, I've got a list, it's about 30 points on this list, but I'm going to keep it very short. I think first of all, let's thank Almighty for gathering us in this way today, for giving us such a blessed day, We were worried about the rain, the weather, but everything has come together so well. And I think, we really should feel fortunate to be part of this force, this groundswell. Malana, believe me, I think the groundswell has begun. Having been part of the organization, and I feel very privileged to have been involved in the organizing of this event, but I can tell you that groundswell, the people that we've worked with here, volunteers, all the passion that they had, we could really feel it. So we're very thankful for that. I want to say this is not a vote of thanks, more a vote of thankfulness. Being thankful for having these courageous and ethical leaders that we have, spending the time with us in the community and sharing the wisdom, but also inspiring and encouraging us. So I think to Dr. Naledi Pandor, to Professor Stephen Friedman, Maulana Bam, Siva Naidu, as courageous, ethical, veteran leaders, we call you, although you have more energy than many of us. But really, it's a thankfulness that we have this kind of leadership and we're able to have this sort of gathering and engagement with them. Our young panelists, specifically Kululeko and Irfan, you guys are so inspiring. And I think, we are in safe hands. Back to Ethics is going to go from strength to strength. And you've heard already how we started to articulate where we're going to take this process. So thank you so much for your guys' time, your effort. It's not just about calling on people to come and speak, but they literally got their hands dirty and helped and assisted in every way possible. I want to thank the gift of the givers. As always, a humanitarian force, but a real ethical organization, epitome of ethical values. And they stand with courage for what they believe in, and they act with courage. And we want to thank you for partnering with this event and all the good work that you're doing and will continue to do. Dr. Ismail Mita and Zinat, I think it is, Dr. Mita's daughter, and the Gaza Support Network, phenomenal work you guys are doing. We pray that it grows from strength to strength. Many people ask me, how do they do this? What's the protocol? What happens here? What happens there? We're living in the midst of a genocide. And I think it's in these moments when people just rise, just ask themselves, what can be done? And we deal with the rest of it later. So phenomenal work being done. I'm asking everybody to really support the Gaza Support Network initiative in whatever way you can, and make growth from strength to strength. And even our fellow, comrades, I would say, from Gaza, who have joined us here, we can't articulate what it means to be experiencing what Gaza is going through. But I think in whatever way we can, whatever support we can, whatever solidarity we can show, we are here with you. The kids out there are producing a mural, and we want to thank them for it. Our hearts are together, South Africa and Gaza, a mural, and please support that as well. If anybody wants to donate, that mural, want to take it into your organizations, put it in your boardroom, in your company or your offices or business. I want to see who will give us the biggest donation. We will channel it to Gift of the Givers. But if anybody wants to donate for that, please, I'm asking you to support that initiative. Then I have to thank the Nuclear School, Nuclear Muslim, the mosque and the school institute. They have really supported this program and really keen to take the next step with regard to similar events into the communities that side. Zain Musa, the teacher, is here with us. Zain, phenomenal teacher, and the way we can see from the learners you've produced, what an inspiring teacher you must be. You deserve a round of applause. I want to thank Kanita as the moderator for this event. As ever, you've done, when you said we have to get the very best out here, and alhamdulillah, you've really assisted with a great program. To Kanata for your time, you know you're very busy, but thank you so much for joining the initiative, as well as to Zakira Badi, our program director. Zakira is also so busy, writing books, traveling all over the place, but has made time to be here with us. A special thank you to Mulana Kola. Mulana, where are you? Okay. There's a small story about how this event began. And Mulana had asked us, you know, is it possible, let's expose our children, the madrasa children, to these ethical values and that. And is it possible to get somebody to come and talk to the children about it? So I said, you know, sure, let's see. And then he mentions a name and he says, let's get Dr. Naledi Pandro. And we said, how are we going to pull this off? But alhamdulillah, so from there, we were, Mulana Bam and Mohammed Baba had discussions, and you know, I think in the way that we know the type of leader that you are, we responded, but we knew we couldn't just be talking to just the school children or madrasa children, we had to make it a bigger event. So that's the story of how this event started, and we're really grateful and thankful for that. We all the work in the communities in Norwood and Houghton as well, all the madrasa has been run, may grow from strength to strength. The Emerentia Primary School, the principal of Emerentia Primary School is a real true community leader and gem. And I think she deserves a round of applause. She makes this venue, I'm not sure if she's still here with us, Nadia, but she makes the venue available again on an ethical, courageous basis. You know, we had to go and to run an event here, and the minute you say a Palestine event, to find a public space is not an easy thing. And I think she gives the space over, she leads with courage, but she involves the school and the community in these initiatives, and I think that's inspiration for all of us. Thank you very much. I have to thank the organizations that have endorsed and supported this event. Social Intifada, where's Khalid Vauda? Khalid, these guys do phenomenal work. You know, we just came together as a group of volunteers, quickly had to put this event together, but they really steered us in terms of all the experience. And the people that he works with, they tell me, one of the best organizers we've got in the community. So well done. Social Intifada, Palestinian Solidarity Alliance, who, you know, always assisting and making sure that the event was fully supported. And they also had stalls here. We had the Nuclear Masjid, the Johannesburg Muslim School, Soweto Muslim Association, as well as Musa Movement for United South Africa. The sponsors and donors, there were numerous and too many to mention. Many of them have generously supported. Somebody came to ask us, how did you put an event like this together? Who funded it? And you know, when we get asked that question, I get very curious about who's asking that question. Because when you don't want initiatives like this to work, you go and you find out who's the people supporting these initiatives, and then you want to cut the pipeline. So this initiative is the community, people themselves, in whatever small way, donated, contributed. Many of them don't even want to be mentioned. And before we knew it, all of this was put together. So I think we really want to thank all of them. Also, Wonder Flooring, Vision Tactical, Teba Tent Hire. I think we've got Yasin Platinum Security, Woodmead Auto. I want to thank all the vendors. They've done a lovely job coming together. All the stores and all the volunteers. Especially now, there's a whole group of volunteers. We started this program with 1, 2, 3 people. We got a volunteer group of 24, co-volunteer group. And we've got Hasina Ismail and also our whole family that have done a phenomenal job. Farida Musa, where's Farida? Farida is the groundswell that we talk about. She kept us on our toes like you can't believe. And I think she's going to make this an ongoing effort. But we had people like Huda, Atia, Marcy, a whole lot of volunteers. We really want to thank you guys for all the work you put into this. And you know, we've got to thank Mohammed Baba. Where is he? Mohammed Baba and his entire family. We said, who are we going to get to volunteer for this event? Mobilized his whole family to be here, and a bundle of energy. Mohammed, we look at you as a veteran that the way you were here, I was asking you, who's that activist? So that's nice to still got all that energy. I think I mentioned everybody, the most important thing, all of you who have attended this event, I think it's, you know, we were worried, how many chairs do we need for this event? But you fill this place up, not just physically, with your hearts, with your kindness, supporting everything that's going on here, encouraging people around you to be part of this. So really well done to all of you. And then finally, please forgive me for anyone I may have missed out. Any shortcomings in the event, in the program, we tried our best. Any positive criticism for future, please leave that with us. But really apologies for any shortcoming. We thank Wonder Flooring as well for the carpets and the kind donation, and there's a new drink, the Milaf drink. So please support the Milaf drink. Finally, I want to say, just remember, back to ethics. Wherever you go back, whatever you do, it's back to ethics, whether it's here in our communities in South Africa, Palestine, anywhere in the world, back to ethics. And somebody said, we can't come to an event like this and not shout one slogan. So whoever made that suggestion, can we go? 1, 2, 3. Free, free Palestine. 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 From the river to the sea. Palestine will be free. From Westbury to Emiratia to Gaza to Sudan, anywhere in the world where there's injustice. Back to ethics is coming. Travel safe, everyone. Till next time. Shukran, sir.